Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Auto Tech Show. Of course, our podcast that talks everything automotive technology and innovation. My name is Mark Babin, your host, and it's great to have you with me. So many people tuning into this episode, and it's a really good one. As you know from the title, today on this pod, we're looking at how you can effectively bring innovation into your company culture at the deepest levels to help foster creative thinking and empower your team to make great innovative steps forward. Now, to do this, I'm very honored to bring in all the way from Montreal, Canada, Dave Casey. Dave's an expert on all things innovation and is the founder at Innovation Leaders Club, an elite club composed exclusively of senior executives in innovation leadership positions, of course, with their primary purpose be to share best practices and experience among these innovation leaders to propel it forward. Dave, I love the association, the organization's goal. It's fantastic work that they're doing. And it's great to have you on this episode to really bring this topic to the forefront. It's one that we keep hearing come up. So I'm really excited to have you on, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you for having me today, and I'll try my best. I'm wearing two hats, so I'm the founder of the Innovation Leaders Club, so I'll try to do my best to represent the 2,500 club members that we have, and I do spend, I would say, almost every day having at least discussion, also attending sessions. So I've heard a lot of things about those innovators, but I'm also hands-on supporting these organizations to increase the innovation capacity. So I'll be juggling between the two, what I see and what I first experience on site. And I'm sure there's a lot of things interesting we're going to come up.
We have developed a 60-page visual guidebook on how to develop an innovation strategy. It is a fully illustrated step-by-step guide to building the foundation of an innovation system. Click the link in the description below to download it for free.
From all your talks, and I'm curious what of course, in your association and conversations that happen and the work you do, what are some of those common challenges that you hear people deal with, and how can we proactively prevent that?
There's all kind, and you have to keep in mind that innovating, it's a human thing. It's people that are innovating for people. So most of the issues that you will have are not so technical issues. You will have some human issues. And so one of the challenge, like I was talking about earlier, is people that are managing a current business. One of the challenges is how we sustain the current offering while we're developing something new. But ultimately, we have, especially in the automotive industry, there's some 90-degree shift or at least 45-degree shift. So it means that new will cannibalize the current. So and how do I manage my day when I have the two different? There's no other way, I think, by having separate teams. Okay, so we have a team that's sustain the current, so we innovate through extension then, and there are people that are developing something that's going to be a challenger of the current, in fact it's going to replace, especially for electrical car, because we really have to think differently. The fact that there's wheels and seats and I would say that's the only thing. Everything else we have to rethink differently, because we got to make lighter car, we got to make the way things are made, and also the possibility of what you could do with it. You have to so we have to remove the bias of being in a current offering, and so that's one of the challenge that we one of the things that the issues that I see a challenge is funding, because it's and most of organizations, especially in the developed countries, there's public money that are willing to invest into switching the automotive industry in a more sustainable way, and you should pull all the leverage and to use that money, because ultimately when you will start making those new product lines and you will make profits, the government will be there to tax you. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is why I call sharing risk. So they are not giving you money. It's just that they're investing in order to get profit later on. So they're there in some cases to save or protect jobs, but also they're there for business, because ultimately they make business with organizations that are profitable. And I have a story which is quite interesting. It's Kodak. Like you may know,
of course.
Kodak.
Yeah.
They have invented invented is a big word, but I think I would say they put it mainstream how you can make photography back like more than 100 years ago.
Yeah.
But one thing that they have invented, it's a business model that we call right now the razor business model, which in fact it's you sell like a component, not like a product not that expensive, but the replacement part are higher margin. So now we see with Nespresso coffee machine, for instance, but that's what it's the razor and blade business model, but in fact was invented by Kodak. Because if you were buying the Kodak, then you have to buy the film, then you had to give the film to someone who would develop to process your pictures. So you would buy chemicals and papers, and so they had that whole system. Okay, and Kodak in 1978 they invented the digital picture. So they were the first in early 90s to come up with digital camera to sell public. Okay, I had one of them, and they had 1.2 megapixel. They had a docking station, and they had like a connector with pins to plug on a tower, and it was working fine. But the thing is, they were so into the business model of selling consumable, so they were not able to find ways. How can we make money by selling a camera? And then we don't necessarily make money afterward because everything is digital. So that's the issue, and they struggle with that, and ultimately, at the end of the day, people were looking at how can we make money, and people were focusing on selling consumable, and ultimately they ended up bankrupt. In fact, even though they invented one of the best innovation we had in the 20th century, digital picture, they were not able to make to transform the organization, and they really hit the wall, and they went bankrupt. So that's amazing that some organization invented something that killed them.
Yeah, I think there's a few of those. If we look at that example, I mean, there's the whole Blockbuster saga we could speak about, right? There's all these that they invented the way we go about something. They had a business model, but they refused to innovate, or they didn't see the capability. And yeah, you're right, they didn't survive, like you said in the very beginning.
I didn't bring the Blockbuster because it's really North American thing, but obviously at one point they had 6,000 store when they noticed that Netflix was growing fast. And even at one point, Netflix was having some issue, and for I think it was $200 million, they could have bought Netflix, and they didn't because they had those mortgage with the brick and mortar, and ultimately they ended up hitting the wall as well, and they went bankrupt. And that's very sad because they invented the way of renting a movie, like it's movie on demand. So you had to take your card though, but it wasn't demand. You wanted to see a movie, then you would drive, you would rent the DVD and come back, and but it wasn't demand on internet was not there at that time, but we're starting slowly because this is how Netflix came up with streaming. But streaming was low quality, and they didn't even have new films, and they were not producing at that time.
Not to the level they are now. And now we see that industry developing on its own with every major, Apple making and production, and Amazon and everyone sort of going into this space. So I really like that example of how, I mean, the Kodak example is great. I mean, that's something you'd read about in textbooks, right? In years to come. As if you're a leader, if you're in a position as an innovation leader within a company that's going through this innovation, there are these challenges, like you mentioned. How do they navigate that internally? How do they have the right conversations? How do they onboard the right people? Maybe they're bringing in new departments, having to open doors between departments that were so separate before. How do they navigate that in order to ensure that they don't turn into a Kodak type of situation?
That's really interesting. There's different ways. So like I was mentioning earlier, based on the ambition or the focus where you want to innovate, they create teams. So they in fact, they identify programs, innovation programs, and ultimately programs, like I mentioned earlier, it's multiple projects going toward the same direction, and they ultimately make small teams. So one of the bad habits with innovation, and we say, oh yeah, innovation, we have to build those multifunctional team, bring all people together. And at one point we get those huge team of people, and it's really hard to do things. You're trying to push your innovation forward. You have to convince a lot of people. And what is interesting with Amazon, so Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, keep pushing something. He calls the two pizza team. It means that the team has to be fed with two pizzas. If your team is bigger than that, so it means your team is too large. So you have so there's a debate how many people you can fit in US, because especially West Coast, they eat a lot of pizza.
Yeah,
you come from the West Coast,
that's two
so
people.
You know what it is. And but it's between 5 to 8 people. So what it means, it's define the ambition you want to go, let's say the Model 3 for Tesla, define the different components that needs to be done, and get smaller teams working in the agile way, everyone having his own objective, and then you manage the interaction of those teams. You're not having that 150 people team. That's not a team. Okay, so we got to make things smaller, because ultimately we're effective when we are smaller groups. This is why, if you look back in the army, this is something that I've understood for a long time. So they said, like, at the section level, no more than 10 people. So, and that's the move in section. Then they get into platoon, they get into a company, then they get into, but ultimately it's the section that moves on the field. So that's the same in organization. You got to make sure that you stay small. People really feel that they belong into something. It's like if you want to be in a very large canoe. Let's say if you're a very large canoe, there's like 20 people that fits into the canoe, and then you row. And let's say if you stop rowing, you'll see the canoe keep moving. So you say you don't feel that you're rowing. So you ended up doing is you ended up doing less effort, because you do not see the impact of what you're doing. Yeah. So it's the same when you're a large team. Like some people tend to lose motivation because they don't see the impact. When you're part of a smaller team, then you're motivated. So that's one of the things that we're trying to get a bold, ambitious at top level. We really set the program where I want to go, but ultimately we break it down into smaller teams working towards the same direction, and then we manage interaction, and we manage also issues, because innovation means getting into a lot of issues. That's the thing about innovation. In some cases, we have never done it, or maybe someone else has never done it. Most of the time, someone else might have done it somewhere, not in our industry, not in our country, not or not in our company. But it means there is something new, and when it's new, it comes with uncertainties. Uncertainties comes issues.
I really like this. It's such a realization what you said with the small teams aspect, because it makes sense. Like when you think about it, it really makes sense. You can manage teams interactions, but the teams stay agile. I really like that you mentioned that. On that last point that you brought up, taking inspiration from other industries, I have to ask, is that a fair thing to do? You think if you're in an industry that is slow to progress, like automotive typically, is it fair for companies within this industry, the different niches of the industry, the different sectors, to take inspiration from what perhaps like the retail industry is doing, or healthcare, whatever the other industry may be, to take inspiration and bring that into your team and develop your innovation based off of that? Do you see that a lot?
Definitely. This is why the Innovation Leaders Club is a multifunctional club.
Okay.
A lot of innovation groups are very sectorial. So you have people in the automotive car industry, for instance. You have people that are in the med tech. There's people there. And so, okay, it's interesting. You feel that you're sharing some of the thing with others in your field, but ultimately you don't necessarily learn that much. If you really want to learn, you have to sit with people in industries, and there's always industries that are ahead of you. back in like 30 years ago, it used to be the aerospace, the space industry, the military that used to bring all kind of innovation based on technology. But now we see more and more in the consumable product that bring all those technologies, and it's the opposite. Now we see the aerospace industry listening or looking at what the consumer industry is doing and learning from others. And the same for car. If you see those car, I'll give an example with, again, for the Tesla, because everyone knows Tesla, and they inspired themselves more into the tablet industry. And when they came up, let's say especially for Model 3 with that big tablet, people say, yeah, it's not a dashboard. It is a large tablet in the car. So you see that they inspired themselves where on other industries, and people felt comfortable because they knew what it is. Yeah. And those are the things that this is why in the club we keep promoting this. But also we use that to convince. Okay. Members they are trying to convince their CEO or general management, and there's no better person to convince another managing director of a president than another president. So when they visit another organization, they hear from another president, that it's really convincing to them. They say, okay, he or she in the same seat as am I, they have done it, I can do it.
If you haven't already done so, you can get your hands on our popular 60-page visual guidebook for free. Click the link in the description below. Don't hesitate to watch the next video to learn even more about innovation management practices.